Good afternoon. How are you doing? It's a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. I'm very pleased to be sharing the stage with these wonderful people involved in the co-op movement here in the Northeast. This is the second year we do this conference for the Cooperative Connecticut. It's huge work that has placed colleagues like Baruch and all the members of the board of directors of Cooperative Connecticut for us to have this beautiful space, to be able to have interpretation, to be able to have the delicious food that, by the way, I didn't cook by myself. My colleagues from Tortilleria Semilla, Ana Araujo, who's not with us today, but Elizabeth as well. She's somewhere around here. And that speaks a little bit about the co-op that I am part of, Tortilleria Semilla. We cook food. And for us, this panel is very important because we are going to discuss a little bit about the importance of co-ops in immigrant communities. Because in this country where we have been historically in oppressed positions, in work where our labor is taken, but it's not compensated, co-ops, in my opinion, are a way to fight this. And I have my history with co-ops, but before I share my story, I would like to hear from my partners here today. I would like to hear a little bit. What is your story with co-ops? How did you hear from them? How did you learn from them? And how did your interest grow in co-op? How did that came about in your lives? I would like to hear because we're in a row, so if we can each take a turn. Okay, you can hear me. Good afternoon. It is an honor for me to have been invited to this panel. It is a great opportunity to be able to share, to be able to speak a little bit of the co-op culture arrived into my life, and also as an individual, as an immigrant. I grew up in a co-op culture, in a family that did co-op and just didn't call it that way. I'm from the south of Mexico, from a state called Oaxaca. My grandmother came from the northern mountains, and she educated us in a family of women with this vision of service. She always told us everything you learn has to serve the community. It's not something just for you. And she always said, no knowledge is a stone, just learn it and grow on it. So we grew up with that vision, but she came from a community where that's just the way you live. So in the state of Oaxaca, the one I'm telling you about, has 570 municipalities, and 417 of them are ruled by indigenous governments. What does this mean? It means that whole communities, whole towns of 3 to 500 people are ruled with this model that this indigenous Oaxacan scholars have called communitarism. They have called it indigenous governments. They have called it or miscalled it use and customs. It's been called different things. Even if we try to compare it to other philosophies in the world, some even speak that indigenous people are anarchists, but that is not true. The anarchists learned from the indigenous that were community. And I don't say this, history does. Flores Magon had interaction with anarchists from the other side of the world. And there was a historic interaction where they learned what these people did in their communities. But the interesting thing is not where it comes from, because there's also studies stating where it comes from, whether it's from the governments, back from when the Spaniards came and municipalities came to be and the way of government. The interesting thing to me is how it still remains, how it's remained throughout all of these years since the arrival of the Spaniards to Mexico, to the South of America, and it still remains to this day. So why is this interesting to bring this up today to Connecticut? First, to invite us all to break the way we imagine. First, to break the barriers of our mind. When we are imagining and dreaming of creating a co-op, we can know, we can hear what's happening around the world. And I speak of Oaxaca because that is my experience. But I'm sure in other parts of the world, there are other processes for community work that are also very interesting, that are not an ideology. These are lifestyles that have prevailed for years. And I invite you all to imagine these communities ruling themselves through assemblies by raising hand vote, making important decisions, defending life, defending the earth, the water, and organizing themselves in an organic way. Now, if it's not impressive as it is, I want to talk to you about how I met the way community businesses work. Not only the people where my grandmother comes from, it's the Northern Mountains region. It's known by the Commonwealth people. What does that mean? The Commonwealth means that the assets are managed in a common way. Businesses have been created, community businesses, we call them, which would be what we know as co-op here. So these community businesses come up every year and they employ local people in the community, regardless of whether they attended school, if they're engineers or no, they all learn within the company. And you start to know how the business works. They learn what they need to become part and make it work. What is this used for? To prevent or avoid migration, to foster rooting of people in their communities. So people have income this way and they also have learning. They build a life around their collaborations in the community businesses. And what happens in the end at the end of the year? Where there is a broad assembly and you expose how the community business did that year. They share profits among the members of the community business. And by the end of the year, they also decide what these resources are going to be used for. So the people vote on what the community needs. They say, we need to improve water supply. I don't know. We need solar panels. We need to strengthen another community business. So the whole town votes on what will be done with the profit from that community business. So we have businesses, lumber yards, we have gas stations, water purifiers or water plants. There is ecotourism, a lot of ecotourisms. The Commonwealth towns, if you put it in Google, it's going to show ecotourism, but it's a lot more than that. There are women-owned businesses that do jam and pack it, women-led businesses that do art, they make garments and different things. So for me, this introduction is to tell you where I come from. That is what I was used to see in Oaxaca. That organization of people doing and creating amazing things. So now, as the niece here in Connecticut, as an immigrant, I started to realize that that was not common. I started to realize that that was special. I started to realize that people were surprised by that here. So I think it is a great motivation to turn around and see what other people are doing so that we can break those barriers. We can break the barriers of our imagination and we can clearly say, there are different government systems. There are different ways of managing. There are these ways of collaborating. There are these hearts that want to work together because it's not just that this capitalism makes us all sick, makes us sick with envy, with ego, of wanting to be protagonists. And sometimes personally, I've lost hope, saying no, nobody wants to collaborate anymore. But I turn around and then I change my mind and say, no, the last thing we need to lose is hope. And by finding the right people, we need to turn around to look at the right people so they inspire us. so that we learn. And Zapatism may say the extractivism of hope now. And we are in a moment of getting inspiration from those experiences. And in my experience now here in Connecticut, I have been getting close, trying to find a political home for myself because I wouldn't be able to do my full version without having a political home, a place where to develop myself. That is part of my essence as Oaxacan. And I always try to find this other part to be part of a community. As an immigrant, I couldn't say I'm going to just shut myself down in a 40 hours a week job. I'm just going to wait till I go back to Oaxaca because there is nothing else you can do in this country. So, fortunately, I found the right people, or they found me, or we don't know who found who put them in my path. And that is how I got to know an organization called Heavenly. These organization that I'm a part of, the board of directors now. It's an organization that dedicates to support women that are refugees and immigrants. It's a 6 month program where women participate. They take English classes, computer classes, knowing how to navigate the system in legal terms, knowing the rights. And another 4 months they spend taking up rooms in places where they can get training, work training. So in this work training, they learn skills focused on getting a certificate for food safety, food handling, and better employment opportunities. In the end, after they graduate, they are supported on getting a job. For a while, this organization has been going for over 5 years, working and always assessing how the project is going, how the program is going. And because it is a board of director integrated for members of the former alumni board of communities, it gets feedback. And that is how we got to the conclusion that empowerment for women. Okay, how do we know that the empowerment discourse towards women, also capitalism, has involved it to integrate women for the exploitation system simply? Where are we going to integrate women into the workforce? To what workforce? What does this workforce offer for them so they can shut themselves down 20 hours on an Amazon job? Or what type of employment will these women have? So who is it serving that women are integrated into the workforce to feed that system? As we spoke this morning, thinking about transformative things and thinking about what is transformative for employment and economic development of women. What is more transformative than co-op? What is more transformative than cooperation, than building community, than knowing how we can crack the system little by little, planting seeds with baby steps. And that is how the drive for this year came to be. Heavenly has dedicated to also hear what our needs are for care.
As we know, and it is a big barrier for women in justice, and it's a system, the care system. So a lot of them, they do need daycare for their children. So we are trying to develop develop a daycare where the students can obtain employment. And right now we have over 100. And right now we have 95 graduated, 85 graduated with a secure employment, and 50 that are involved in the community and volunteering services. So I would like to hear stories from the other ones too, how they got involved in the co-ops and how they started learning about this. So I would like to hear a little more about the organizations that you work with. Can you hear me? Yes. My name is Gabi Pereyra, And I think this is the only room where I can say my last name and understand it, and they're not cutting me off right or saying it in a different way. My pronoun is her. And I've been here for 8 years, and I immigrated, being a where I'm from. I'm from Uruguay, and Venezuelan. I am a third generation of immigrant. My grandmother and my great grandmothers, they immigrated from the countryside to the city, and because of different political wars, but all my grandparents had to immigrate from one place to the other. So ever since growing up, the system, the collaborating system to be able to survive in a new place, that's something that was always present. It was always with me, to the point that when I was young, 5, 6 years old, I thought the accents were characteristic of a person, because all my community, everyone had a different accent when they will speak and express themselves, because there was always a lady that would take care of us, another lady would pick us up from school. There was always someone that was helping us. And with that belonging to the community, we are all together and listening together. And that's how I grew up. And when I came here to the United States, I found a place that it was very individualistic, very different for many, many reasons. And to be honest, I didn't know that. I I live that what the effect of the United States. But I didn't know the effect that the United States has in their own land. And that is something that I have seen and finding and leaving myself for the last 8 years. And I have been also working in a place um, for people, the trust fund for land with people of color. And we want to find collaboration, co-ops where we can have healthy relationships with the lands here in the United States, and be able to speak about freedom in lands. Um, Hello, everyone. My name is David Molina-Hernandez. And when you mentioned and you asked me to please speak a little bit about my involvement with the co-op and the movement that we haven't talked about the organizations that we're a part of. So it's a little difficult for me to separate them, and I will try not to separate them, but not too much, right? So I can explain. So I came to this country. I didn't have any papers. That was about 7 years ago, almost 8 years ago, and by I met by firsthand, and also through my community, because of what we go through and the difficulties that we face, and also because of the different dynamics, right, that we have in our community. So once I was legal, I wanted to find a job where I can work on bettering the conditions of the immigrant community, with or without papers, right? And that's when I started with Fuerza Laboral, forced labor. And that's where I started getting to know more about, first of all, that the co-op in the United States, or the north of the United States, is very small. I am Colombian. In Colombia, there is co-ops of hundreds of people that work together, co-ops that move the economy. And to me, that was very strange that they didn't have that here. So then I said, okay, well, in one way, I said, okay, it makes sense. It's a capitalistic country, and the movement is not so massive. But at the same time, I wasn't expecting that. So from one end, I thought, okay, yes, I would be interested to install a solidarity economy. I learned more about that, and then talking about the work and why I got involved. Then I'll tell you more as to why I think it's one of the best ways to build a solid um, movement in our community, in my immigrant community. Thank you. I will try to be very brief. I am Mexican. Um, in Mexico, we have co-ops since 1957, and it's a country that and has a co-op. And it also comes from the indigenous culture that was also doing this work. So, like I said, I was in the indigenous community where we did you when I was a child, and we try to work together in the community to grow our community. In the school, in the small school where I had to grow, it was part of a co-op as when I was 6 years old in elementary school, because to be able to enjoy food at school, the children needed to be part of the co-op. So I grew up in a co-op culture. And also in 1964, I started doing committees and unions and organizing it. I was only 9 years old. I had no idea about what I was doing. My my intention, it was always create a democratic co-op, and then later on I was fortunate enough to grow as an organization. In 1994, I was with the National Cooperation Plan de Ayala, and we were also part of the process with the government, and we used to also advise in them in the sessions that we have with the co-op world. And I also had the opportunity of working with Ecospace, the Federación of Agriculture, um, and also in Nicaragua, in Guatemala. And I have lived in many different countries, helping people, organizing them through different process. I organize and also develop other processes, co-op process in Ecuador. And when I didn't have anywhere else to go, I came here. I ended up here. So here I am. I came here about 10 years ago to help to coordinate a process for immigrant workers in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. People from 16 different countries, 9 work centers, 6 languages, different languages. And guess what I ended up doing? Co-ops inside the worker center until well, I had to immigrate because I wasn't there to create co-ops. I was there for, so then I decided, okay, let me just work on co-ops, because co-ops, I realized that here, this is our opportunity to take advantage of everything that the system offers and use them for our people advantage. So we can create so co-ops here in a country that gives rights to businesses. So here we're business owners, but then the business can give us rights. It can give us retirement funds. It can give us social security. It can give us healthcare. And that is a solution. So when I was a director at the worker center, we had to fight against the abuse, the harassment, and we had to fight against the threats that they used to make. But if we're the business owners, that's not there anymore. That's removed. So creating co-ops, to me, is creating solutions for our people. It's putting that there so that we can help them come out of this. to help us give and understand each other. So that is why I build co-ops, because this is where I come from, these processes, and I'm just going to leave it there. Well, thank you, Javi. And I think it's very powerful what everyone is saying.
Especially because they emphasize in how the communities have been historically marginalized, have been putting up resistance. They are the ones that are developing these co-ops. And also, it's very interesting that in the conversations I hear again and again the word culture, and that we need precisely a co-op culture, and that there is a difference between the legal establishments that are businesses and the co-op culture. And precisely, and in this country is where we seek isolation and individualism, precisely when we find more challenges to develop that culture beyond businesses, the culture of co-ops, even within co-ops. So I would also like to hear from your experience, what are the challenges you've faced, both you as well as the communities you work with? And how is it that you and the communities you work with are facing these challenges? And how can co-op bring more power to documented communities specifically? Is it okay if we start on that side? All right. Okay, the first question, Javier, what was it? Uh, what are the biggest challenges? How are you facing them? And how is it that after those challenges, you develop more power for migrant communities? One of the first challenges we need to solve is, what do we do together? A bunch of people with no papers that need work, that have no social media. And I'm not talking about Facebook, but networking supports. There are no family networks, there are no savings, there are no assets, no contacts. How do we do to, from there, start building alternatives for people like us that arrive in this country with 5 bags and that's that, and running from a war, from oppression, from cyclic situations behind us? So, how do we do so people can be rooted and create new cultural processes? How do we build community with what we have in hand? And sometimes what we have in hand is my neighbor, people close to me. And sometimes the people close to me don't come from where I come, they don't speak the same language. So, how do I do that? We build alternatives, different alternatives. We understand that this country privileges, like I said, private property and business owners. So we build LLCs, which are like anonymous corporations. You don't have to say who the owners are. And that allows us to have owners of small businesses without necessarily having to say their name. That allows us to create productive spaces where people can organize themselves, can back themselves up, and start learning processes together on how to build the social solidarity economy to support family, community, and cultural processes. And when I started working in co-ops here, I say, "Do you speak Spanish?" I kind of speak English. I understand everything. I speak a little bit of Portuguese. I said, "Okay, let's go." Immigrant. Today, I work with communities from Egypt, Iran, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Burkina Faso, Vietnam, Congo, Angola, Ivory Coast, and 16 countries of Latin America. In Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. 35 migrant co-ops, all of them undocumented, all of them. How do we do it? Well, we just scratch our nails and we work it out amongst ourselves, figure it out. What are our biggest challenges? What do we do with our good willing partners that want to help, but that don't want us ruling our processes? What do we do with the developers, the white partner developers, good nature, that become managers of our co-ops, that are managers of our processes, that bring our portfolio of clients when they get mad at us and that abuse us with their partners, their good nature? So what do? We trained ourselves not to depend on anyone, build capacities in one language, in all of them. Who trains? We do. What is our work? To train each and every community on the culture in their own language so that they have the ability themselves to not depend on anyone, to not be expecting anyone's help for them to come and solve their problems. And today I can say with a lot of satisfaction that the work that I work with almost everyone here, and with those that I still don't, I will. I promise you. And I can tell you that it is wonderful to sit in a room where I have to wait for someone to interpret what I'm saying into Arabic, for someone to interpret what I'm saying into Portuguese, and for someone to interpret what I'm saying into any other language. But not just that. We are building the curriculum for training everyone in their own cultural context. We are not literally translating what a handbook says because we have communities like the Somali Bantu community that don't have written expression. They don't have a written language. So that's a homework. So how do we do it? Do you know how much money the Department of Immigration Services has and the Institute of Co-op Development for this type of work? Do you know how much staff I have, how much support staff for the work I'm doing? Just me? But that doesn't stop us because we have a bunch of people behind us, organizations that can help us co-fund the processes. So when I don't have money, I say, great, because that makes it easier for me to knock on my neighbor's door and ask for sugar. That facilitates asking for help. So I can tell you that I can tell you that I have organizers on the ground, like here in Connecticut, that we have an organizer on the ground that comes and addresses co-ops here in person. And I don't pay her because I have no money, but another organization pays her. And in Vermont, we're doing the same thing. And in Maine, we are doing the same. I don't need money. I need partners. And not partners that come to take the direction and direct what I'm doing, but that can fund what we want to do locally. The challenges are to find those partners respectful and that don't see us as a part of the kitchen staff. And what are we building? I'll tell you later because this is not the time yet. Well, to follow that up, that's a tough one. But there is something we need to discuss, especially amongst ourselves, for immigrants. We want to talk about the difficulties that are headed our way among them. Well, let's start with how my organization thinks about cobs. My organization started 18 years ago. I wasn't around then, but it started 18 years ago. Focus on the injustice around labor, which I would say is one of the most violent ways that immigrants face, that undocumented immigrants face in this country, which are labor abuse, work violations, unjust salaries, and so on. So the organization started that way as a worker center, working on a case by case, learning, teaching about workers' rights, and faces two major challenges. The first one, something Pavel mentioned, and it's that in this country, we privilege businesses, private property, right? And more than anything, employers. Employers have a lot more rights than employees. And the other issue was that the work injustices, unfortunately, are a cyclic issue where someone that suffers of a work injustice then fall, fall, falls into another one and a few years down the road and in another one. And in the worst of cases, which is the worst case, but it's a very common case where people suffer work injustice, but they learn that injustice. They learn how it's done. They learn how the employer is unfair. And when they have a little bit more power, when they have more experience and more years in this country, they apply that injustice to people that just came to this country. So that, so we don't romanticize because we are immigrants. When we look at that, it's something that, breaks your heart because you say, how can you be doing to someone the exact same thing they did to you, right? An American did to you, and then a Colombian did it to you, and you are now doing it to your Nicaraguan friend. So by looking at those two challenges, finding solutions, workforce, there in Providence, I forgot to mention that, Providence, Rhode Island, you find a solidarity economy in Cobb. Why? Because Cobb businesses, work abuse as we know it right now, cannot exist because we're all partners, because we all have a share of the profit, because we all have a vote, and because we all create, and because if the ship sinks, we all sink with it. Nobody wants to go down. And because there couldn't be a cyclical issue where people learn from the injustice and apply it. Because once you create a co-op, you start thinking about in a less individual manner and more in a collective way. So what we are going to apply is solidarity. You're not going to apply work injustice. So that is why that I think it was 8 years ago. Pavel knows workforce before I joined them. And we start with this. And we start to see what happens in that other issue, which is, for instance, in Rhode Island, there was no legislation for businesses to become co-ops. So workforce with a lot of partners, with good and bad partners, like we said before, in 2016 passes a legislation so co-ops can become a reality and people can register as co-ops within 3 months. It was impressive, but it's going to show us what little we have about what a co-op is. Pavel said it, of why when people can be owners without putting their names down, without putting their information there, they can benefit. And also because when you are an undocumented migrant and you don't have the full spectrum of your rights, you have to join the rest. You have to join the others that are also undocumented. And among everyone, you need to start coming up from the sub economy. We had not discussed this till now. It's a very controversial term. Some people hate it, some people like it. I'm just using it as an example where the majority of undocumented, the only way they can get a way of earning a livelihood is through a sub economy, is one that does not register the large numbers. And when the budgets are done and so on, undocumented people can a lot of times not access any of the federal funded programs or state funded programs because they need those numbers that we cannot give them. We cannot tell them, oh, we have 15 people here helping you, because they're going to ask us for 50 social security numbers that we're not going to be able to give them. So that is why attacking through co-ops the economy is a way of leaving that bubble that generates so many critical issues. And I'll leave it there so that you can continue. Thank you.
Well, challenges. So I'm going to start as in the individual system and then systemic. In my opinion, as an immigrant, one of the biggest challenges that we have individually is how it comes like being sad with immigration, the grievance that comes with that, leaving your home and not being able to hug your family, your grandparents, your community, the smells, the foods that you grew up with. And then suddenly you're saying, no, I'm not going to go back to that. I'm not going to have that anymore. And also realizing that no one cares if your country is going through a war or if you're having challenges because you have to go and work. You have to move forward. And it's like we turn into kind of like robots so that we don't feel that grief inside of us. And we carry that with us. And that makes us, and from what I've seen and also through my process, that grief, that sadness, you carry that with you. You have it here and it's here with you. And if you don't say hello, how are you? Let's drink a coffee. Let's cry a little bit. It will always be there. It's always going to be there that, like we have to work, we have to move forward. We're in this country. Yeah, we're here to make some money because your landlord don't care if your country is falling off, right? And they're killing each other. That is the first thing, and I think we don't talk about this enough. The sadness that we have within us being in a new place and not being able to go back to the other place where we're from. And once you leave that other place, something happens where you're not there anymore. So you're always in that limbo, where you're like, I'm from here, I'm from there, but I'm not from there, I'm not from here, I don't belong anywhere. And also when I work with agriculture, um, one of the things that one of the things that we do learn and we can bring with us in that suitcase when we go in is how to take care of the land. And this is something that comes from my great grandmothers. This knowledge that we do have land that is in a cycle and it comes from a seed to a seed. You have the responsibility of take care of the land because the land takes care of you, and the land is where you are. And we work in systems here in the United States that are, they've been exploiting people for over 500 years. There's a big genocide against the indigenous from this country. They moved them from their land, and then they brought some people, became slaves, and working in here. And it continues with that system. It hasn't been broken. And that's where we're at. So since the collaboration and the co-ops, how do we learn to live the pain of being displaced from our own land and to learn how to reconnect with the earth, with the land that's giving us food, and at the same time taking care of our culture, taking care of our seed, and at the same time making something that can help us thrive economically and financially is very difficult. And the only way we have learned that it might work, because I'm not going to dramatize that, I'm going to say that it works because we don't know, but it's to work with a co-op, not only to have the land, the property, but also the way we sell it, we take care of it. But if we sell it that way, we put the price, we educate ourselves with the things that we are missing that we need to learn about, and we will try to learn about to learn how to navigate the system, because there's always going to be someone else that came before us, and that's the person that we go and knock on their door and say, let's have a cup of coffee, let's talk. So that is the co-op, like this, from the relationship up to what's giving you the opportunity to leave, not only to survive, but to live with dignity. And in my work, we always try to find the best way to see what is the best collaboration in the co-op in the best place, the best state, so that it can help us move forward. So that way the next person doesn't have to start, begin from zero, right? They can be a step three and be ahead. Uh, Thank you. And just to close, right? And I think the challenge is also in the thing that she said, it's a process, individual process, and also working in a co-op and creating co-ops. I think it's having the ability of having that cushion, that waiting cushion, that reserve, not only to be able to have a co-op, to invest in your co-op, to wait for that time so that the co-op can kind of like give you a salary, wages, right, and income. And I think that's a luxury that was very difficult to sustain in this context, right? Because in other contexts, you do need your daily income, right? Or if you have your family, your friends, they will support you. They will help you so that you can grow and develop. But here is a challenge, right? Here having other people coming in with a debt, but not only you're carrying that debt, but you also have the American dream of colonizing this part where people make so much effort to get here. And when they come here, they come with that idea of, oh, I made it. And then I'm going to go live the American dream. And then realizing and saying, wow, you know what? That is not real. That's not reality. And not only you have to let go of that idea and kind of like let go of the capitalism American dream and see that things are different here, right? So a lot of other people, they can't let go of the American dream and saying thank you to this country, they pick me up, and I'm like, no, it was this country that forced you to immigrate to come here. No, they're not just giving you an opportunity. No, we are here to take what was taken from us. No, we're not here to just say thank you for to the gringos because they are giving us the American dream. So that's what the community, the immigrant community is all about. And also having that cushion, that support to dream, right? And not only for the co-op, but also the emotional cushion, right? To be able to dream and say, yes, I can do that, to empower yourself. So yes, it is difficult as an immigrant, especially being a woman, and also trying to organize a co-op and opening spaces so that those the women voices can be heard. And there is so much work to be done, but I'm just gonna leave it there um, because I only wanted to learn with 15 minutes and I think I was speaking very fast, but I didn't really know the dynamic of the questions. And I think I said it before. So I think I'm done with what I had to say this afternoon. So, oh, well, thank you so much. Right now, I feel energized and I feel very inspired by everyone that's here, the panelists that are sharing with us. And Angela, like she was saying, that when we come here, when we immigrate, we come here with our dream, with our seeds, with our music, with our culture. And these are the seeds that we are planting, we are putting on the land by having these conversations and having events like this one so that we can grow and kind of like create some openings, and feed the beast kind of saying. And I don't know if you have a sentence. I don't know if you have one sentence, 5 words. What would you say to someone that is starting their co-op or might be curious about starting a co-op? Very briefly, just to say bye. I'm just gonna use a Caribbean expression. Get ready because what's coming is merengue, fast merengue. No, don't let anyone fool you. This country does have history. In this country came from big unions and big co-ops, and we have to recover that history. It belongs to us. Don't feel alone. There's other people doing it, and we can all learn from each other. And I will say, just to remember that the co-op, we have it in our blood, in our ancestors' knowledge. So we just have to go back to the beginning, look at our history. Thank you.